the objectives of the session today. So this is a kind of short introduction to using film with young people. The idea is that we will, by the end of today, have a better idea of the ways that film can support work with young people, have been introduced to some simple filmmaking techniques, better understand some of the options available when you're making films on mobile devices, and have an idea of how you can share and showcase some of that video. So I thought I'd start off with this. Why do we want to make films with young people? What do we gain from doing that? And kind of step one is it's creative. That's kind of the obvious answer, isn't it? You've got, and these are sort of some different elements, I guess, that go into creativity. That's a word that has so many different meanings. We could talk all day about what creativity is. But this is kind of what I've broken it down into. So that idea of like inventing new solutions and problem solving is really, really incorporated in making films, especially when you're making films on a bit of a budget and with mobile devices. But that one at the top is the one that I think is kind of, for me, the most important, is that it's creating. It's not just consuming that media, it's being in control of the creative process and all of the different elements that are involved in that. And that can be really, really empowering. And is also kind of all these multiple skills that kind of get brought into that, including media literacy. We at the CLC are doing a lot of work at the moment into digital literacy, into young people's ability to kind of navigate an online space. This is a picture taken of my boss, Sarah. We did a talk, myself, Sarah, and one of our other colleagues, at BET. Don't know if you know BET. It's a massive education technology kind of fair, I guess, that happens every January. We did a talk on the main stage there a couple of years ago that was all about critical literacy and whether or not children and young people actually have the skills they need to navigate the online space safely. And one of the big things that we kind of ran into when we were looking at this is the idea that online literacy is not limited to words. Literacy encompasses kind of image literacy and video literacy very much, because that's the content that young people are consuming a lot. And our argument would be that helping young people to be part of the creative process for some of those types of media actually makes them more literate when they're consuming. So if they've been through an editing process, or they've been through the process of storyboarding something and kind of trying to tell a story, working out like, what's your angle on this? What are you trying to get your audience to feel? If they've gone through that process and they've seen how they can kind of manipulate media in their own ways, then they'll be kind of more literate when they're consuming that. And of course, there's a future careers angle to this as well. The world is kind of a very strange place, and a much stranger place since I made this slide. But especially within London, the film, VFX and games industries are booming. I imagine that is still true. I haven't checked the latest LMI here, but people are playing a lot of video games and watching a lot of TV at the moment. So those are growth industries in the UK, and having those skills and a portfolio of kind of content that young people have already created can really help there. I had an activity here, but I'm actually going to skip through it. And just go to this page here, which is the most in-demand hard and soft skills of 2020 on LinkedIn. Just to point out that at the bottom of the top 10 hard skills, video production is actually on there. It is number 10 on the top 10 hard skills that LinkedIn are looking for. So the first thing we need to do is think about the practical considerations. So we know that we want our young people to be testing this out, is being creative, making all of these kind of amazing things. Hannah will be sharing the slides after the session, so no worries about that. But we've got to think practically. We don't have unlimited budgets. How nice would that be? We can't all go and buy sort of fancy equipment. So we need to think about how we can make the best of what we've got. And these are kind of the main practical considerations that we need to think of. Step number one, what devices have you got access to? We don't need to kind of get into buying new stuff. You might want to, but the first thing you need to do is kind of do an inventory of what you've got available. And the main answer to that usually is this. Most people have a mobile phone that is capable of taking film. Great. You can make a really, really great, interesting piece of film using that. Alongside that, so that's kind of the hardware question, but what software are you going to use? So if you're filming, you might just want to film using the camera function on your phone or on your tablet. That's absolutely fine. You can collect the footage that way. You can do some very, very simple editing using something like that. But then you're going to have to think about how you want to edit that footage kind of properly, in inverted commas. If you're using an Apple device, for instance, you might want to use iMovie. If what you're trying to do is get a really kind of short, snappy video, I would highly recommend checking out Clips. If you do have access to an Apple device, it will have at some stage automatically downloaded onto your Apple device. It's one of those Apple apps that sort of appears as if from nowhere occasionally when you do an update. And it's brilliant. It's like a very, very quick and easy clip taking, filmmaking app. It's quite hard for me to show you, unfortunately, remotely, because it won't work on my computer. It will only work on my phone, and holding up a screen to you is not the most fun way of learning. But if you do have access to an Apple device, Clips is a really interesting. If you have a look at this, you get a nice view of my flat. This is what the homepage looks like on Clips, and you literally film by pressing that pink bar there. You take a little bit of film, you then let go, you go and take another little bit of film, and it automatically puts it together as clips. Creates a film really, really quickly. I've used that in training sessions where we've made films in 10 minutes and managed to tell like a nice little story with it. So that's a really, really good app to check out. The other thing that I've got on here that's worth checking out is Adobe Spark Video. Adobe Spark Video you can get for free. Everything that I show today will be kind of low cost, no cost. You can get an update, it's one of those you can pay for the premium functions one, but you can get the kind of basic level for free. And again, it's a very simple bit of editing software. So you can basically sets it up. It looks a little bit like a PowerPoint kind of slides presentation, but you put film or you put photos onto each page, and you can add music over the top of it, and then it runs it all together as a film. So it works a little bit like Clips, but that's really worth checking out as well, and works cross-device. So you can use that on an internet browser, or you can download the app onto a device. The next thing to really, really think about is how are you recording sound? Most mobile devices have what we call omnidirectional microphones. So they are picking up sound from everywhere. That's fine in a lot of circumstances, but if you are somewhere even vaguely noisy, the sound of somebody talking isn't going to be, you're not going to be able to separate that very easily from the kind of rumbling background noise. You might be able to hear the rumbling background noise of the street outside my flat at the moment. I wouldn't be able to kind of separate my audio from that. Depends what you're trying to do with your film, but if what you're trying to get is kind of a voiceover or somebody telling a narrative, you're going to want to try and get clean audio on that. The two options there really are making sure that you're recording somewhere incredibly quiet, which if you have access to kind of a rehearsal room in an empty building or something like that, that could be a good option, or recording your audio separately. Recording your audio separately, if possible, I always think is a really good plan, because you can go somewhere that is specifically you've chosen because it's quiet, because it's got soft furnishings rather than sort of hard edges where things are going to bounce, and you can record without thinking about how good the visuals look. When you're recording sound, you've got two options there again. You can either record using a sound recorder. There's usually one built into a mobile device, a kind of voice notes or something like that. Or you can record as film, because in most editing software, you can separate the audio from the video very, very simply. In something like iMovie, it's literally sort of one click of a button, you can separate the audio out, and you could put that over the top of some other slides or some other images or video if you wanted to there. You can also think about using a directional microphone if you have access to one. So if you have a microphone that you can plug in, that's great. That will also help if you are then recording your audio separately. Doing anything down a directional microphone, you're just going to get a slightly cleaner audio. And you can get a directional microphone that plugs into a mobile device for about 30 quid. So you don't need to spend huge amounts of money on that to get something that works pretty well. The last thing to really think about, and I think I've got another slide on that later on because it's very, very important, is stabilizing your shots. Sound and the stability of your shot are the two things that are going to make or break a film looking professional. However still you think you can hold your hands, nobody can. Any tiny, tiny wobble is going to show up really, really big on a film. If you've got access to a tripod, that's brilliant. One of the first lockdown purchases that we got as teachers at the CLC was tiny little Gorilla tripods. They're about this big. You can put a mobile phone in the clamp at the top. I think it was a grand total of about £25 for the tripod and the clamp. And it has meant that whenever I'm recording videos, whenever I'm recording tutorials, Jenny, you're going to get to see a lot of those for the tutorials that I made for you. I can pop my phone into that and just make sure that it's held stable. For anyone working in theatre, most actors will have something like that knocking around for self-taping purposes. You don't have to spend a lot of money on them. But if you don't have access to a tripod, you can just use a pile of books or a well-placed shelf or a chair, depending on the angle, but it's just finding something that you can put your camera on to keep it still is going to really, really impact the quality of that video. So now we're going to have a little look at some film theory. So the first thing is the 3 C's and the 3 S's. Now these are concepts that are kind of put together and shared by something called Into Film. If you haven't come across Into Film before, as in Into Film, do check it out. It's a BFI program about film education. There's loads and loads of resources on there as well. But they kind of talk about the 3 C's and the 3 S's as ways of analysing film and ways into analysing film. But I think they're also important to think about when we're looking at creating film. So I'll give you, one of the C's is character, one of the S's is sound. Anyone want to have a go at going in the chat and popping in other things that you think might be in the 3 C's and the 3 S's? Here we go. Colour, character, camera, story, setting, sound. Now there are obviously a huge number of other things that we need to think about when we're making films, but I think these 6 things were a really, really good starting point. So when we're thinking about colour, for instance, it's, are you standing in front of a white wall while wearing a white t-shirt and a white hat and all you look like is a weird little floating face? Are you thinking about your light? If you're being lit from behind, you're going to sort of look like a shadow. All of those things are really important practical considerations. Character, who are we following? What's the story that we're trying to tell? And camera, you've got all of those different features that we were talking about before in terms of keeping your camera nice and still. And we're going to look at kind of shot types and angles coming up. So that would all fit under that. Obviously story, telling that tale, setting, where you're putting it, and as we've discussed, sound. So if you sort of focus in on those 6 things, you can actually really start to kind of build a really good looking and interesting and well thought and put together piece of film. And they're really nice ways of, if you're looking at film with any of the young people you're working with, they're really nice kind of starting points for discussion around film as well. These are our kind of 5 main shot types. Our first is an establishing shot. So that's kind of often used at the beginning of a sequence where you're trying to set the scene, trying to show where you are. As you can see, I am in the garden of my block of flats, and you've got your character is in context. So it kind of roots you immediately. Where are you? What are we looking at? Gives you a sense of the geography of the space. Then you've got your long shot. So you can see the whole of your character from top to toe. Your mid shot. So we're talking waist to the top of the head. If you're doing any kind of talking to camera, straight narrative, a lot of the time if someone's kind of walking and they're being filmed, that's going to be the angle that you sort of want, because you get that sense of movement. You can see that the whole body is moving, but you've also got close up enough on the face that you're getting that discussion. The next one is the close up, the sort of shoulders to the top of the head. And then you've got your extreme close up, where one body part, one picture, one petal of a flower, whatever it is filling the whole screen. looking at those different shot types, the ideal film will have a combination of those. It helps things look more interesting and really, really helps with like the telling of that story and that narrative. Where should we be focusing? What should we be looking at? What are we trying to take away from that part of the film? Alongside that, you've got your camera angles. And these are another thing that you're going to want to use in combination. So you've got your God's eye view or your bird's eye view, which is from up. Your high angle, which is your classic selfie angle, perhaps your most flattering, makes your jawline look excellent. So that's like slightly above eye level. Your eye level shot, which is great if you want it to look like somebody's talking directly to the audience in your, when they're talking directly to the viewer. Your low angle, I describe that as like the angle that if a small child took a picture of you. And then you've got your worm's eye view, which is from the floor, which is a really interesting angle and not a very often used one, but can give a really interesting perspective. So worth kind of exploring those things. So for the next bit, I thought we'd have a little look at some tips and tricks with filmmaking, specifically with filmmaking with mobile devices. Tip number one, planning is everything. If I can give one piece of advice, it is that a comprehensive storyboard of some kind, it doesn't have to look like this, it can be a sort of written down one, people can put it in tables, people like planning their shots in different ways, but comprehensively planning your shots is going to be the best thing that you can do if you're trying to put together a film. It's also really good practice to get young people into. A lot of them will be absolutely kind of used to taking film footage, to doing bits of editing kind of for social media, things like that. But if you're thinking about doing anything longer than about a 30-second film, you really need to plan it properly. That's going to help both in terms of the shooting schedule, because you might discover that you want an establishing shot of a certain rehearsal room right at the beginning and you want one near the end. It doesn't make any sense to film those things in that order. You're going to want to film those two things together because that's going to save you time. You're in that location anyway, and you can tick those two shots off. You know where they are. So that's going to help with the shooting process. It is also so helpful when it comes to the editing process to have that plan. And the storyboard can kind of be adapted as it goes along. Obviously, things change in a practical sense, but keeping that constantly up to date for then if the person who is doing the film is doing the edit, or if somebody else is doing the edit, that is going to be the most useful document you can possibly have. Next thing, we've talked about this, but thinking about how you're using sound. And also thinking about whether you need to use sound for certain parts of your storytelling. So this is a very simple video that I made. You'll see a couple of other Lego videos coming up as well. As part of a Lego education program, this is what I spend a lot of my time doing. I do have a real job, I promise. And put together this little film. What I chose to do here is actually not use voice. So to use text, which I was able to do very easily using iMovie in the edit. You can put titles in. Again, if you want a title, put it in the storyboard. Put titles in to tell the little bit of story that I needed, and then use music. And most editing software, this is true of everything that we talked about before, so this is true of Clips, this is true of iMovie, this is true of Adobe Spark, will have rights-free music kind of built into the software that you can use and test out. So that's what I did here. I just used some of the music that was there available in iMovie for free and put it over the top of my little video. So I'm just the story gets told, very simple amount of text, and you get the nice little jaunty music that goes along with it. So all of those things are worth thinking about if you can make your life a little bit easier, if you don't need to have that kind of sound and that voiceover. Landscape, not portrait. This is another really important thing, especially when you're doing this with young people, because if they're used to filming for TikTok, if they're used to filming for Instagram, it's going to be in portrait. Clips, you'll notice, encourages you to film in portrait as well. Any other type of software, it's going to look weird if it's in portrait. It's going to look squished. You're going to have those black lines down the side of it. If you're trying to watch it on a laptop, if you're trying to watch it on a TV, always film in landscape. Record plenty and then cut. So this is what I was talking about in terms of the storyboard and in terms of it being clear what the action of the scene is. It's really important to think about where each shot begins and ends and what you need to tell the story, and then film a bit more. So if you are filming someone walking through a door, film a few seconds of the shut door first. Then you get the film of someone walking through the door and then walking off. You can cut down the footage of the shut door so you just see the shut door and then see it open. But it's really important that we get that sense of what's being changed by the action of the scene. The door was shut, we're seeing it open. You can't work with footage that you don't have. So it's always better to have a little bit more on either end and be able to cut it down than it is to lose something. That is true of sound as well. When you're filming with mobile devices, they usually have a little bit of a lag. It's like half a second between when you press the video record and when it actually starts. So if you press video record and someone starts talking straight away or starts moving straight away, you're going to lose just the beginning of what they're doing. Especially with sound, that can actually sound really shonky because you sort of miss the beginning of a word, the beginning of a sentence, or even the breath that somebody takes in order to speak, and then it sort of feels a little bit weird that you haven't seen that. Like there's something sort of oddly unnatural about it. So it's really important to make sure that you're kind of filming a little bit more than you need to at either end of your shot, and you can fix that in the edit. Great. So this, as you can see, is another one of those globe films, and is a really good example, I think, of what we were talking about earlier in terms of using a combination of shot types and angles. So this group have used a really wide variety of those things. I think it really helps with the storytelling. The reason I'm showing you this one as well is that it can be interesting to think about having a visual theme that runs through your film. So not necessarily a narrative theme, although you can, but thinking about it kind of takes it in a slightly different direction. You go, okay, what is the visual theme that we're choosing here? I was going to say, can you spot what it is in the video? But I'm going to tell you so you can see it from the off. So their visual theme, they decided there's a whole thing with the Globe, with their advertising at the moment, which is around like life in the round, seeing things in the round. It's round. There's a logic to it. So they decided that was going to be their visual theme. Their visual theme was going to be circles. And actually that is then what led to the whole storyboard, the whole idea of how the film got put together. So you'll see that when I play it here.
Experience life in the round. Come to Shakespeare's Globe.
So I think that's really effective, because what they've done is they've gone, what is our message? The globe is round. That is the thing that we want people to come away from this from. And I think you really get it. You know exactly, like when you go in there and you see that spinning shot at the end, it's like, yes, absolutely. This has been visually consistent from beginning to end. And they've used that variety of shot types and angles to really good effect. And again, that was done in one afternoon of some training, and it was all done on a phone and all edited on mobile devices as well. So you can put together some really interesting stuff. Playing with speed. So this is one of your other options with settings. You can tell I've been spending a lot of time playing with Lego, can't you? You've got a couple of options with this. Most mobile devices will have an option for something like time-lapse built in within it, so you can kind of play with the speed within the app, or you can do it in the edit. So I'm just going to show you examples of both. So in the first one, I put on the time-lapse function. So what I needed to do was sort some Lego, put on the time-lapse, showed that. So I'll just quickly show you that. Useful if what you want to do is kind of get a sense of an action, but you don't want to watch the whole thing happen. That can be really useful. If you're moving boxes or building something that you want to film, that can be really good. I worked with a youth theatre once who put a time lapse on and spent a day painting their set, and then you had the time lapse of that whole set being painted, and it became a sort of 2-minute video, but it was really, really effective and looked really cool. The second one here, I did in the edit. So this is an option in most editing software again. What I did was I sped it up by 2. All done in the edit, so you can speed it up by 2 or by 4 depending on how much you want it to kind of look like it's been sped up, but those options are there for you. So if you want to take some footage and take it a little bit slower to make sure you get the detail on it, you can then speed it up in the edit. That's always an option. Keep the camera steady. We've already covered this, but it's worth repeating. This is in fact the exact tripod that I have. It's really small. Sometimes if I need to sort of have something at head height when I'm standing up, I still have to put it on a shelf or on a pile of books or something like that. But it just makes sure that the camera itself is being held really steady. So when it comes to sharing that content, you've put it together, brilliant. You've got a film. What are you going to do with it? You've kind of got 2 main options, Vimeo and YouTube. YouTube is great, obviously. You can kind of put it out there for so many people to see. If you have a work YouTube channel already, you can make the most of that. We've got, if you go to the London CLC website, I'll put a link to this in the follow-up email after the session. We actually have a guide to using YouTube for education. It's tailored towards schools, but I think it's really useful for anybody who's thinking about using YouTube for working with kids, because it sort of sets out the different settings that you can use and the ways of kind of trying to keep it as safe as possible. My personal favorite is Vimeo. Now, so very easy to upload, very easy to label. You've got security settings that you can put together within Vimeo very, very easily. You can password protect videos if you want to. You can make it so that only people who've been actively sent the link have access to it. You've got a lot of that within Vimeo. Again, it's one of those things where you can get a free account, but you've got kind of limited upload within a given week. It's pretty good though. You can upload like 3 or 4 short films in a week if you want to on the free account, but you can then pay to have more storage, etc. Going forward. So my personal favorite on this is Vimeo, but you have the options either way.